Hello, my name is William McMahan. I'd like to welcome you to the first video tutorial being brought to you by the Museum of Contemporary Art, Jacksonville. I teach a couple of workshops each month at MoCA. One of them is figure drawing, the final Friday of every month, and one of them is called Drink and Draw, which is a portrait drawing workshop that takes place the first Thursday of every month. So on this series of online tutorials, I'm going to focus on demonstrations pertaining to the figure. Today I'm going to draw a human eye in profile. I'm going to be doing so in a generic manner. I hope everyone enjoys. So whenever I start my drawings, I try to do so in a manner, I have a mantra, light, loose, and quick. I'm trying to hold my mark making tool closer to the base to facilitate longer, arcing, loose, searching marks. And I'm going to start my drawing by drawing a full sphere. And I would encourage everyone to practice drawing circles. It's just a sign of a good draftsperson. It's a great exercise in general. And when you're drawing portraits, you have two eyes, which are both full three-dimensional spheres. And then you also have the iris and the pupil on each one of those eyes. So in this drawing, it's not going to be fully relevant, but you need to be prepared to draw 6 circles per portrait drawing. So I would encourage everyone to practice your circles. All right, so I'm going to think of that as the entire eyeball, full three-dimensional sphere. I'm going to give some context for the brow ridge and the recession of the eye socket and the nose. And in general, I would encourage people to have the eyeball too far back from the bridge of the nose rather than too far forward if you're going to err on one side. We have this little dip here. We're going to have the brow ridge, which is going to be extra protection for the eye protruding out. And then we would have the bridge of the nose growing out this way. Just to give some context for the drawing. And the brow ridge is going to be part of the facial structure that the eyebrow rests upon. Brow ridge. All right. Now I'm going to return to the eyeball itself. And really, when we're drawing a human eye in profile, the kind of shape of the eye that you're observing, the white of the eye, really is a lot like a triangle. So I'm going to come here. My lower eyelid rim is going to have less rise and fall. It's more of a continuous arc. The upper eyelid is going to have more rise and fall. Here, more peak here. And it's very important to really embed in your conscious mind that eyelids have depth and dimension. They exist beyond the eyeball. So I'm going to over-exaggerate the thickness of the eyelid as I come out here. Take that nice and beyond the eyeball. I'm going to mimic that arc here, showing that ledge, lower eyelid. Then there's this little part of the eye right here. I call it the soft fleshy patch. Just a little bit of extra protection that goes beyond the eye. It's beyond the eye lid. There's a great deal of variation in terms of how prominent people's soft fleshy patches are and what angle they exist at. Kind of think of the eyebrow existing again on that brow ridge. And everything that I'm going to be doing is generic. So every person is going to vary from this. I'm just giving general formulas to keep in mind. And then if you're working from an actual model, you'd be observing the model and modifying this accordingly. Now, if we're viewing from straight on, we would see the iris and the pupil as full spheres. As we start to tilt the head and shift the head towards profile, if the iris and the pupil continue to look straight forward, those circles become more of ellipses or ovals. So we're usually not seeing too much of the iris and pupil from this perspective. Generally, generically, the iris is going to end around the lower eyelid rim and the top part of the iris is going to be obscured by the upper eyelid, and there's variation from person to person. Then we're going to think, okay, pupil in the middle of that. Our tear duct, sometimes you would be able to observe it, sometimes not in profile. Would be existing around there. Our eyelashes, I'm going to go ahead and establish my light source, which I'll put in the upper left. Our eyelashes in profile are going to be shooting forward. All right. Now, I was mentioning before about the importance of being mindful of eyelids having depth and dimension. I now have them existing beyond the eyeball. I'm going to go back in with my trusty Tombow eraser, my Mono 0, and go in and get rid of these lines. I still have that understanding that that is a full three-dimensional sphere underneath there. The deepest part of the human face that is not an orifice is the upper inner eye socket, which would be up in here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some shading in the upper inner eye socket. I'll go ahead and throw some lower eyelid lashes too, although upper eyelid lashes are going to be more prominent than lower eyelid lashes. So if the upper eyelid has enough depth to cast the shadow onto the eyeball, which it does, and if you see, I'm going through and making my marks using vertical hatch marks. Then conversely, the lower eyelid rim is going to have enough depth and dimension to catch a highlight on it, on that ledge. That's a detail, if you can include that, that's very rewarding for a viewer to observe. I'll come back, shade in the upper inner eye socket, as I was mentioning earlier. We want to then consider doing shading on the eyelids as if we were shading a sphere. We have to be a little bit mindful of not going too heavy on the lower eyelid rim. We can make people look like they have a black eye, or they're very tired, or they're intoxicated, or some combination of the three if you go too crazy with your shading on the eyelids. But we don't want to be hesitant to shade on both eyelids and the eyeball too. Just because the eyeball that's exposed is white, we're still shading onto the eyeball. We're trying to stagger and show the eyelid existing beyond the eyeball. Eyeballs are wet and reflective, so we want to capture distinct highlights on the eyeball to show the viewer that they are wet and reflective. And if you'll observe too, I just come from many years of teaching and trying to teach ways in which are going to set artists up for the greatest likelihood of achieving success in their drawings. But I'm bouncing around my drawing. Even though I'm just drawing an eye, I'm kind of bouncing between recessed eye socket, eyelid, upper eyelid, lower eyelid, shading onto the eye, etc. It's a good habit to get into, to bounce around drawings. I'll go in, make my highlights, block in my highlights. They're going to be crisp, distinct white highlights that will really help show the viewer that the eye is wet and reflective. Don't be in a hurry to go into details or push values, but I'm going to try to keep my videos succinct. So once you do feel confident that you have the pupil well oriented, that is the spot in your drawing that you're going to lean and really push your value, your dark value. And you want those nice crisp highlights also. And then we're going to have, we can't show what color someone's eye is in a black and white rendering, but we can show how light or dark the value of their eye is. I'm going to be darker on the rim of the iris, and then I'm going to have a number of lines shooting in towards the middle of the pupil. And then depending upon how light or dark one's eye is, that's going to determine how many of those marks and how heavy we press to apply them. With eyebrows, we'll block in the shape of the eyebrow. Then we'll replace those edges with hatch marks. I'll get rid of these edges. I block it in. We observe on our model what is the shape of the eyebrow. Then we get rid of edges and we get rid of our edges on the eyebrow. Replace that with hatch marks. I got a plane shift here. So I'm going to change the direction of my marks. And then what I would do is I would continue to push my values, doing so considering light source. That's the only way we're going to know where to put our values and where our highlights are going to exist. I would push my values and continue to push my details. The more range of value I'm able to achieve, if we're able to get rich dark values, bright white values, and a range of grays, that's going to lead to our drawing appearing the most three-dimensional that it can. Think of drawing as a push and a pull. We get information down on the page, we evaluate it, and then we respond to that information. I hope everyone enjoyed the first instructional video that I put on for Museum of Contemporary Art, Jacksonville. For more information on exhibits and programming taking place in the museum, please visit mocajacksonville.unf.edu. And if you enjoyed the video or just want to support the arts and get extra privileges, I would encourage everyone to consider becoming members of MoCA. I will see you guys soon in the next video. Take care. Keep drawing.